Our next friend is Pastor Jim Powell, who is the lead pastor at Richwoods Christian Church. One of the finest Christians I have the privilege of knowing. Someone who has exemplified to me, love your neighbor in his action, not only in his words. And in his friendship with myself that has developed over the years, I have known Jim. Please give him the applause that he very much deserves.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's a privilege to be here, and my heart is just elated to see so many people here and to see so many non-Muslims here. I think it's a beautiful testimony and it's a privilege. I just want to take a few moments and share with you a little bit about my journey that helped bring me to here tonight. On 9/11, I was sitting in my home, like many of you, watching the news, and I do not remember the specific program, who it was, but someone was explaining that Islam was in essence peace and that the actions of these terrorists did not represent all Muslims. And as I sat there in my home, my living room, I found myself getting defensive. I found myself becoming, in my own spirit, just argumentative and thinking to myself, that's just not true. And then if you fast forward a few more years, our church, we purchased what was Leith Furniture over here, and we relocated our church building, and we moved right next door to the mosque. And one of our church board members was a friend with one of the physicians that was also on the board here at the mosque. And we decided to reach out to the mosque, and our leaders, our board, had a meal with their board here at the mosque. And it sort of broke down the barriers. We began to have dialogue and conversation. And then a few years later, I was asked to teach a class, an OLLI class at Bradley University with my good friend, Rabbi Daniel Bogart and Camille. And as the three of us taught that class, we began to get to know each other and build a friendship. And really the tipping point was one day Daniel invited us over to his house to watch the St. Louis Cardinals in the playoffs. And it was a bonding experience, wasn't it, Daniel? And we introduced Camille to baseball. But that really began a great experience, and a friendship evolved out of that. And then, as our friendship evolved, one day, Camille said to me, Jim, would you come over to the mosque and would you teach a class on Christianity to the people who want to come, and would you be willing to answer questions that they have about the Christian faith? Because many of the members of the mosque here had moved and they had questions. And so I did that for 4 weeks. And I found myself just intrigued, and I found myself making friends. And then I came on a couple of occasions, and I've actually sit in on their Friday prayers, and I just sat there and observed and listened as Camille has given his message and as they've gone through their prayers. And then this past spring, the leadership of our church, I talked to our church, and our leaders agreed that we were going to do a series of messages on Islam, not to bash Islam, not to condemn Islam, but from the posture that we are called as Christians to love our neighbor. And as we did that 4-week series trying to educate our church and to break down the barriers of fear and phobia that many of our people, even inside of our church, had, we found that some church members could not take it. We had some people who actually left our church as we talked about this discussion on a level that many Christians are not prepared to talk about it. And in all of this journey, I have come to meet some very dear friends and wonderful people here at the mosque, starting with Camille, but many, many others. And as I have stepped into my own insecurities and fears, and as I begin to build a relationship, as I begin to ask questions and listen as well as talk, what's happened is that I find friends here. And I find that my faith as a born-again Christian calls me to love my neighbor. And I am not going to sit back, and the leaders of our church are not going to sit back and allow the rhetoric of hate and fear to dominate as much as we have influence. And I encourage you for being here today, and I pray that all of us do our part to reach out, and you're doing a part of that tonight by overcoming any fear that you may have, if you do, to be here tonight and to engage and to put a face on Islam and to meet somebody and to ask questions. And I just close with one final story. When we did this series in my church, and I challenged our church to reach out, we had a woman in our church who was in another location, and she told me, she grabbed me one Sunday, she said, Jim, I saw this Muslim woman, and she was in the grocery store, and I saw her, and I thought about what we've been talking about in church, and I felt compelled to reach out and to introduce myself and say hello to her. And she said, I was nervous though, my heart was racing, I didn't know what to say or do, and I was afraid I would say something wrong, but I overcame my fear as you've been talking to us about, and I said hello to her, and she said the woman looked at me and her eyes got big, like almost like, what do you want? And she thought, oh, I must have done something wrong. And so then she sort of fumbled her words and she said, well, my pastor is talking about Islam and we're called to love our neighbor. I just wanted to say hello and just greet you. And she said that this woman's face just completely changed. And she says, you don't know how often I feel that people look at me. And I can see the fear. And it's just very rare for someone just to come up to me, a stranger, and greet me. And it was a watershed experience for this church member to overcome her fear, to step out and to see a human being. And I promise you that the Muslim friends that I have made and I know, they're humans and they want to know you and they want to love you and they want to be your friend. And one of the things that Camille and even Rabbi Daniel, that we love each other so much to talk about is Jahan touched on. We don't have to compromise what we believe. We don't have to say everything's equally true. We can hold to our convictions, but yet still conduct ourselves with civility and love. And my hope and my prayer for our community and for every one of us in this room, that we set the tone for our larger community. And one life at a time, we model grace and love to our community and beyond. God bless you and thank you for having me.